There we go. Well, there we go. Camera gave us a rookie mistake there. Sorry about that, folks. Hey, welcome back to the program. Goedemorgen. I think it's actually after morning now. Are we at noon?
Yeah, so goedemiddag.
Oh, there you go. So yeah, good afternoon, good midday. Welcome back to the program, folks. This is Chris live with AfriForum, and the head of public relations these days at AfriForum is Ernst van Zyl, known to most of us as the Conscious Clerical. Ernst, hoe gaan dit?
Yeah, baie goed, Chris. Thank you very much for visiting us again. I think last time we spoke, I wasn't in my new position at AfriForum, and also since then I've gotten promoted, and then also gotten married. That's I think a bigger deal.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit bigger than promotion. We'll make sure your wife doesn't watch this episode. No, but oops, congratulations on the marriage and also on the promotion. So, Ernst, your position now, you're in charge of public relations for AfriForum, is that correct?
Both domestic and
international.
International, yeah.
Okay. So, does that involve coordinating things or doing something like recently? Ernst and gentleman from Hungary, escaping my name right now. Janos. They went to Romania. Did you play a role in that and setting it up or anything?
No, that was solidarity. Solidariteit.
Oh, solidarity. That's right, because he's over at That's right. So that's the thing. I see people on social media attacking Ernst all the time, and they're talking about AfriForum and like, hey, are you?
Well, he used to be at AfriForum. So
yes, but he's with Solidarity now.
Yeah. He's moved up to the Solidarity movement, which pretty much coordinates a lot of the institutions that form part of the movement, which are over 50 at this point. So that's Solidariteit, AfriForum, Helping Hands, Soltech, Academia, all of them fall under that umbrella.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was a Solidarity event, that wasn't an AfriForum event. So in your role with public relations for AfriForum now, what does that entail? I mean, it should be pretty obvious. I think you deal with the media, you try to put campaigns out there?
To put it very simply is when someone approaches AfriForum to want to talk about what the organization is about, what we're trying to achieve, what our mission is, what our successes are, then I'm the person they send to go speak to them, both internationally and domestically. Also, not just with interviews, creating content that shows what AfriForum does. So I recently did a series with the help of AfriForum TV, the studio.
Yeah, they do a great job here in the studio. Really
they helped me with the first episode. So it's in Afrikaans. It's called the Selfbestuur Reeks, so the Do-It-Yourself series. And the first episode is about the neighborhood watches. So I went on patrol with the Rudepoort neighborhood watch and to see what it's like on a regular day, just a weekly day, going out in one of the most dangerous places in South Africa. And it was a grounding experience. I really enjoyed it, but also at the same time found it very insightful in regards to what average people do to keep their community safe. Many of them during the day are accountants, lawyers, doctors, plumbers, electricians,
farmers,
and then during the night they are keeping their community safe for nothing. They're not getting paid.
No, actually, I went out with AfriForum in Zeerust and experienced that myself. It was a fascinating experience. Of course, as a soldier, it's old hat, that sort of thing, patrolling and taking care of security at night, but doing with civilians. I was impressed at how organized they were, and they did mission briefings, essentially what we would call a military mission brief, before they went out, kind of a little bit of map recon to make sure that people weren't doubling up in the same area, and they kind of had made sure that people were in places they could support each other if something happened. I was very impressed, and AfriForum does that all over the country. That's quite an undertaking. So with the public affairs thing, I've got a little bit of pat you on the back here. I don't know if you're responsible, but somebody's responsible. For years, we get the trolls in social media who attack AfriForum and they act as if AfriForum is a political party. It's not. This is the first time in living memory that I don't recall seeing endless trolls on X, Twitter, or anywhere else, YouTube, calling AfriForum basically a political party and talking about, your members of parliament, which you have done because you're a civil rights group. Right. I don't know if that's attributable to you or if AfriForum having success, but congratulations, because it was nice not to see that nonsense, because it's total fiction.
Yeah, well, I keep warning people if you're going to be looking for us on the ballot, you're not going to find us there. And especially if there's 52 parties, I don't want people wasting their time. They're going to go down.
Wait, there's no AfriForum on my ballot.
No, there must be a mistake.
No, the mistake is you thought it was a political party.
Yeah.
So congratulations, that message apparently got out to some of the trolls. They're not.
No, but I mean that was our message as well, is that even though we're not a political party and not directly involved in the world of party politics, even though we do pressure political parties when they are going the wrong direction, or whether, for example, if they want inputs from the solidarity movement or AfriForum on what they should prioritize, then we'll definitely give our inputs there. But in particular with this election, our message was very clear: go vote, go mark your ballot, but that's the bare minimum. Don't pat yourself on the back afterwards and say, I made this massive sacrifice, I've done my part. And like, no, you've done the bare minimum by going to vote. There's still a lot of work to be done, and there's life after election. So even if the election doesn't go your way, then you can't now just say, well, in 5 years we'll try again. Like, no, there's things you can do in the meantime. That was our core message.
Well, it was a good core message, I believe, for this election. Unfortunately, the turnout was very low, but it's maybe not so unfortunate. As I tell a lot of people as an analyst, low election turnout tends to favor opposition parties. So speaking of putting political pressure on parties, we'll get to the election shortly and the ANC and what's going on in South Africa. But I did want to talk a little bit more about AfriForum as head of public relations. What efforts are out there right now that AfriForum's doing? Of course, we know that AfriForum has long been an outspoken voice about rural violence and farm murders that are often ignored by authorities, and particularly by the international community ignored. But there are other issues that you're involved in. For instance, Ernst is a filmmaker. He produced the documentary, which I went to the international launch of.
I'm glad we could coordinate that way, that you were in South Africa when we published that documentary. Yeah.
It was brilliant. So that's self-bestuur, which means self-reliance, essentially. I always get confused because German is selbst, and Afrikaans is like English itself. It's like water. It's the same in Afrikaans as English, but it's Wasser in German. Anyway, but it was brilliant. And a little secret for those of you who weren't there, I somehow made the Anglophone table because I sat down and Mark Oppenheimer sat next to me and David Ansara said, we're the three Anglophones. Everyone else was an Afrikaans speaking person there. So, but Ernst did a great job explaining it in Afrikaans and in English to everyone. And I think it's a brilliant film. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
But you're very welcome. But let's talk a little bit about what AfriForum's up to now. I mean, I imagine rural security, you just talked about patrols and rural insecurity, the border is another issue. But tell us some of the things AfriForum can do.
You know, I had the opportunity to speak to someone you've spoken online with, Jacques Broederijk from AfriForum Security and Safety. You now spoke to him in person. He told you about the new focus that we have incorporated there from the safety side is the spiking incidents that have spiked here in Gauteng and other provinces as well.
Now this is motorists going down the motorway and someone putting spikes on the road to disable their vehicles so they can rob and or murder them.
I think it's sometimes you forget when you speak about these types of crimes, maybe an international audience might not even know what you're talking about.
That's why I was explaining it. Yes, I mean this is not something people in Germany deal with. It's not something people in Denmark ever experience. We might experience in America because somebody left nails on the road off the truck that fell off, but not spiking incidents. The only time you see spikes in America is on cops. They put them right to stop the criminals. But no, it's a very, very scary situation. Jacques and I were talking a few moments ago about a recent incident where the people were actually armed, and nonetheless, these people are brazen. They followed them for 2 kilometers after they blew their tires, and then got out and just started shooting at them. And the woman was shot in the stomach. It's horrific.
And that's why we now at AfriForum have put an increased focus on particularly patrolling those roads where a lot of these incidents are being reported. So our neighborhood watchers are putting them on the map in regards to getting a stronger presence there. Another focus that we have is water. I mean, that's the next crisis that's loading. Everyone
Water shedding.
Everyone knows load shedding, but the water infrastructure is in a very bad place thanks to the ANC. And the AfriForum is also making major strides in order to work with local municipalities so they can use our expertise to maybe even help fix some of these problems that places like Parys are experiencing.
Well, it's interesting because in South Africa, there's a tendency for most people to have, that's the term the international audience is probably not familiar with, but JoJo's, water storage tanks, just because, I mean, South Africa is not a very well-watered country with exceptions of the East Coast and the Western Cape for a bit.
It's actually quite arid,
It is. Only 13% of the land is arable here. When people talk about, taking land back, I mean...
I always tell people to go look at a Google map, a Google Earth view of the Northern Cape, and then I ask them, do you have the minerals to go farm on the surface of Mars? I don't think you do.
Exactly. No, it's a very dry country, and in fact, much of the water. I was thinking about that this morning. It's interesting that you mentioned water because I was brushing my teeth, and I was thinking the water that's coming out of the spigot most likely came from the Drakensberg in Lesotho through the Highlands Water Project, which was never finished by the ANC. There were 3 aqueducts that were supposed to be done. The only one was complete because the National Party started that, and it finished around 96, I think it was. And then who knows what happened to the money or plans. But I was thinking that water probably, the origin was in Lesotho that I used to brush my teeth this morning.
Yeah, no, that's one of the strange ways in which South African infrastructure works. But another thing also, the security, water, and then naturally also coming with that is heritage and fighting for Afrikaans. So we've got a very destructive law that the ANC pushed through in the last moments of before the election. That was the Bella law. And
that's the Basic Education Law Amendment Act or something like that.
And it's targeting schools, but particularly putting all the control in the government's hands. So the government can, through this law, determine the language of schools, can determine any type of criteria for schools. For example, they can go to an Afrikaans school and pretty much say, well, you need to start allowing English students. And you all know how that works. You take an Afrikaans school or any language, you make it half and half, and then 3/4, and then eventually say, well, the majority of students now are speaking English, therefore we are turning this institution completely English. That's what happened at institutions like Stellenbosch.
Yeah,
I saw it happen where, no, we're just going to do dual medium, and then as soon as it's 51% English, they say, well, now the majority is English. We're not going to do Afrikaans.
And I watched some of these debates at Stellenbosch from students who were arguing, students from the Eastern Cape who barely speak English, and making a big ruckus about Stellenbosch having to be an English medium institution. Now, my recollection, and folks can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but the gentleman who donated the land, that is where Stellenbosch is at, when he donated the land, it was under the proposition that into perpetuity, the medium of instruction at Stellenbosch University, the premier Afrikaans university on the planet, would be Afrikaans. It is beyond shocking to see the way that Afrikaans-speaking South Africans, white, colored, black, who attend Stellenbosch, have been mistreated by university officials and by the community there. I mean, it's quite shocking.
I mean, the South African Human Rights Commission found that the university, I can't remember if it was last year or 2 years ago, violated the rights of Afrikaans-speaking students at the university when some of the hostels there quite blatantly told students that you're not allowed to speak to each other in Afrikaans, even in private.
Well, look, it's the same thing. We see people trying to enter universities here in South Africa, and they're being blocked by activists from the EFF and supporters of other political parties because they're white, not allowed to enter the university, but they're students there. It's quite a shocking development here. This thing is completely, it's interesting. A lot of people talk about, we'll get to the African National Congress in a moment, but a lot of people talk about the African National Congress, and I say that, they're very much in league with the old National Party. They are a party that favors one group over another, and they set up a system to enrich that group.
Well, they copy and pasted the racial classification system just like that. They seem to be big fans of that one.
Well, they love state ownership. The National Party, either because they liked it or out of necessity, Sasol and all these things they created, state-owned enterprises, Denel, Armscor, and so.
Strange that the emphasis there on created. I can't really think of state-owned enterprises that the ANC has created.
There have been none. There have been none. So we get back to that. Okay, so security, and of course this thing now, patrols, the spiking that's going on, the border. That's something Jacques also taking a look at. But AfriForum, when you say cultural and heritage. Does it go beyond the concern with the Bella Bill? Isn't AfriForum, one of the purposes is to help minority groups, right? And the main focus initially was Afrikaners, but it's not exclusive to that. But a big focus is protecting the culture and language of
So
Afrikaners.
heritage goes much farther than that. So, for example, Anglo-Boer War monuments or any type of monument commemorating Afrikaner heritage, we identify and we see whether it's being
So
kept.
places like battle sites like Colenso and Spienkop and things like that.
Yeah, well, any place that's being neglected, we see if we have the resources to help maintain it, and then we do. Just now recently, there was a press statement that we sent out of the Anglo-Boer War monument that we have been maintaining for the past 3 years because the state just completely ignores them.
What about the monuments in the Free State for the survivors, or for those who died in concentration camps? Are those privately maintained, or is the state responsible for those?
So I don't know what the statistics are there, but I know a very large proportion of these concentration camp monuments are AfriForum, our local branches are helping to maintain them, yes.
Well, that's interesting. For me, actually, I don't have a problem with private institutions maintaining cultural heritage. I mean, I think that's the role of it. For me, I get a little uncomfortable with governments, doing that. That's not in my view, it's not the role of government. Government's supposed to be small and limited. So anything else that AfriForum is doing now or looking to do in the near future?
I think the big thing that we're focusing on now is particularly, again, keeping up with that state-proofing mission of making sure that communities are as state-proof as possible, especially when the state is malicious or unstable, to make sure that they can that communities have the room to take as much responsibility as they can when it comes to water, security, and electricity.
Back to that self-bestowing.
Yeah, okay. But all within the confines of the law. We're not trying to overthrow the state. We're not trying to destroy anything. We just want the room to build.
And I think, Ernst, let me ask you this question, and then we'll talk about the elections, which are interesting. But let me ask this question. A lot of people, in my experience, have very wrong impression, and I'm talking about black, white, and brown South Africans, about what AfriForum is. Let me explain what I believe it is, and you correct me where I get it wrong, okay? So my understanding is AfriForum is a civil rights organization that was created to protect the rights of South Africans and speak out for people, particularly minorities, and particularly, initially, Afrikaners. And that's its role. And it has found niches where the government has failed, where service delivery and governance has failed, that is basically ungoverned space in essence, and you are helping to facilitate civil order. What did I get wrong?
Well, that's pretty much on the mark.
Okay.
Yeah, the thing about AfriForum is we're uncompromising about the fact that we are a Afrikaans Christian organization with a very, very strong focus on particularly the Afrikaner minority. But a lot of the things that we do, a lot of our actions go far beyond that core focus. I mean,
and there's benefits for other groups, not just Afrikaners, of the actions you take.
Yeah, I mean, my colleague Ernst does phenomenal work with his intercultural projects, and there's another thing as well. It's the unseen ripple effect. So, for example, let's say filling potholes. Now we're filling potholes in the middle of a very busy street. Those potholes don't discriminate and say if you're driving a car and you're not an AfriForum member or you're not an Afrikaner.
Or if you're black or if you're white or you're brown.
And then the pothole opens and the car falls in. Like, no, everyone can drive over it. Same with the painted street signs that we do. Same with the neighborhood watches. I don't think there's any neighborhood watch of AfriForum. We have over 173 now. But I don't think any of them operate in a community where the majority of people in that community are AfriForum members. Yeah. I think they all operate in communities where a small percentage are AfriForum members, but that neighborhood watch keeps everyone safe. If someone is being robbed or a crime is being committed, they're not going to ask the victim first, are you an AfriForum member?
Your AfriForum membership card.
Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to help you. Like, no.
Sorry, your card's expired.
Yeah, so there's this ripple effect of creating all these little centers of order. But as I said, our AfriForum also is very aware of the fact that our language and our culture and our heritage give us the energy that we need to do all these things. So that's something we're never going to compromise on, because if you're trying to be everything for everyone, then you end up being nothing for anybody. So that's a very important aspect. We have a very strong sense of identity when it comes to, yes, we are a Christian organization, Afrikaans speaking organization, and Afrikaners are a very, very strong focus of our mission.
Well, I have to say about Afrikaners in general, it's, I think, a fascinating cultural group. I mean, this is a culture that grew out of an amalgamation of Dutch, French Huguenot, Calvinist, Germans, Khoi, San, people mixing together, forming a community, and developing a language that got its roots in Dutch, but is influenced by...
That is a distinct language. It's not a dialect.
No, it is a distinct
language. You have to be quite ignorant.
Dutch people don't understand Afrikaner. Now, most Afrikaners can understand Dutch, but you know, it's not mutually intelligible.
A lot of Afrikaners also lie. So when they'll speak to someone speaking Dutch and they'll say, "Oh no, I completely understand." Meanwhile, if you ask them, "Can you repeat back what he just said?"
He said, "Buy a donkey." No.
No, I think that's another thing. Next year, Afrikaans is 100 years old. It's 99 years old this year.
As a declared
as an official language.
Yeah. Right, but I mean, it grew out of Cape
It's much
Dutch.
older than that. But as an official date next year, it's 100 years of being an official language of South
I think that's something that folks should celebrate. Now, it's the only language in the world that has a monument dedicated to the language, and that's the Talon Monument.
Yeah. Have you been there, Chris?
Dozens of times. In Paarl. It's a lovely spot, sits on a hill, and the Talon Monument has these points that go up in the air.
Yeah.
Each of them show the contribution of different languages that came to form it. 7 different points, if I remember correctly, which is fascinating. But we'll do a discussion for the 100th anniversary. We'll talk about that, and I'll talk to other folks about it. Perhaps maybe Schalk Berger. I'll get him. He talks a lot about Afrikaans culture and language. But so what I want to say is that it's a culture and language forged under adversity by a myriad different group of people coming together and becoming a group. Like walking earlier, I saw all kinds of German surnames. Muller, Faber, and several German, but these are Afrikaners now, just like...
Can't speak a word of German. Yeah.
No, they don't. Just like de Villiers, that's French originally, and Duplessis, these are French names.
Yeah.
So you've got this amalgamation and forged a culture, which has been under pressure throughout its time, from the English, from the Xhosa, from the Ndebele, and then lots of allies, Tswana allies and Basotho allies as this culture developed. And then, of course, the Anglo-Boer Wars and the horrific things that happened there. So it's a culture that's survived to this point. So it's good to see someone has an institution that's focusing on trying to help people keep that culture. And you're right about schools. This is why Welsh almost went extinct, because English was taught in all the schools. But in the 1960s, a number of Welsh had enough, and they said, we have so few Welsh speakers left, first language speakers, we need to do something. And so they pushed, and legislation went in, and Welsh was taught in the schools. And now a large percentage of the Welsh population can actually speak their own language. But we've lost languages like Manx on the Isle of Man, that's gone. And here in South Africa, we're losing languages. Khoi and San languages are disappearing rapidly. One of the ones that's endangered and about to disappear as a first language is Nu, which is a Khoi language, if I'm not mistaken. There's an Oma who lives up in Uppington. Her name is Katarina Esau. And to our knowledge, she's the last first language speaker of Nu. And it's sad. When she passes, she's 88, there'll be no original speakers. Language is important to who people are, their identity. All right, so that's enough of the soapbox on language and culture. Let me shift focus. So, for those of you keeping count or paying attention to news events, not only is America having an election this year, and Britain having one on the 4th of July, thank you there, Rishi Sunak, on our Independence Day, a little poke in the eye for the Americans, but the Tories are going to lose, so he'll be sorry he called that election. So those elections, but South Africa just had an election, and it was a historic election. So Ernst, let me get you to take your AfriForum hat off, and let's shift your focus to the conscious caracal. So let me talk to the conscious caracal now. Tell me your thoughts on this election.
Well, I think there's 2 very big positives that come from it. Firstly, the ANC losing its 31 party rule majority. And secondly, the EFF doing embarrassingly bad, crashing from a double digit to single digit.
And losing 500,000 voters.
500,000, more than, 300,000 voters just gone. In an election that they branded 2024 as our 1994. Well, oops. Well, maybe I think my advice to Mr. Malema would be to maybe you should have focused less on chanting about murdering farmers and focused a bit more on building that school that he promised 5 years ago. Yeah,
which hasn't laid a single brick.
No.
Yeah, so it is a fascinating election. For those outside South Africa, if you're not familiar with it, the African National Congress has ruled since 1994, and they reached their zenith at 69% of the electorate at one point, and they've declined since then. In 2019, excuse me, under Cyril Ramaphosa, they dropped to just 57% electorate, and people saw warning signs. This time, 40%. They dropped 17 points. I'm starting a clothing line called -17. If anyone wants to buy shirts, hoodies, beanies, -17. We're going to put a little ANC logo on there so we don't get the copyright claim. But it's quite a precipitous drop. And a lot of analysts immediately said, well, it's because of MK, the Mkhonto Sizwe party. But the numbers don't add up. The ANC lost 4 million voters. MK gained 2.3 million as a brand new party with virtually no existence. They're vaporware. They have no offices. They have no budget that we know of. They can't even get their list of candidates together. They're guessing who's going to be on it. So they got almost 15% of the electorate. But if you take the votes that the EFF lost, and if you look at KwaZulu-Natal, you can see very clearly that the EFF was virtually destroyed there. Almost everybody that had been voting for the EFF switched to MK out of either loyalty to Jacob Zuma or because they're Zulu. And so they lost probably 500,000 votes there. So that takes the MK party from 2.3 to 1.8. Where do those 1.8 million people come from? Even if every single one of them had been ANC voters who voted last time for the ANC and were going to vote this time, they lost 4 million votes. That doesn't account for the other 2 million plus. It's a disaster, a calamity for the African National Congress. And watching I don't know if you saw President Ramaphosa last night, but Yeah, it was Big Nothing Burger. He came out and said we're going to form a government of national unity. It seemed much more like an effort to calm the currency markets than to actually come up with a solution for South Africa. So they didn't lose because of MK. They lost because of service delivery, crime, kleptocracy. What are your thoughts? Do you agree or disagree?
For me, it's at the moment we're living in the time of speculation. A lot of commentators on people I can name at least 20 or 30 people with different theories on why the election went its way, and everyone
including my
is
theories.
100% certain that their theory is the reason. No, for me, there's something that really stands out when it comes to the winners and the losers of this election. The two main winners for me, from what I can see, are the ANC, and funnily enough, the Patriotic Alliance, just by looking at their growth.
Do you think the ANC's a winner?
Losers, I mean.
Okay.
The two losers are the ANC and probably all these little parties that didn't even get one
and
seat.
the EFF. They're
And the EFF, yeah. And the big winners are MK and PA.
Yes.
And the interesting thing is, the two winners both have one thing in common, and that's the fact that they mobilized around ethnic lines. Now the PA owns this fact. I mean, they don't deny it at all. MK
colored.
Strangely seems to deny it. They talk about, no, we're a party for all South Africans, but you look on the map and you can clearly see where their support is.
Look at the map of KwaZulu-Natal and you'll see where they're at.
And it also, it goes into Mpumalanga as far as you find Zulus.
And they picked up about 10% in Gauteng as well.
Yeah.
But that's a consequence of this being the financial and economic hub of Africa, people coming up here.
Yeah, so for me, it's very clear. PA, like I said, owns that fact. They said, no, we want to give a voice to the coloured electorate of South Africa. That's their mission. That's their what they're saying. MK kind of shies away from it, but everyone can see, though. I think those are the two big winners. I mean, I'm mentioning the PA because they went from 6,000 votes in 2019.
6,600 to 300,000 plus.
30,000, yeah. It's amazing growth.
And they've got 2%. And they could be a kingmaker. I'm not predicting this coalition, but if the ANC wanted, they could do an ANC, EFF, PA, get some over 50%, and they could rule. Not going to happen though, but that's a possibility. But there aren't a lot of good options for the African National Congress. They have an internal revolt. If they go one way, members of their National Executive Committee are angry. If they go another way, members are angry.
I'm glad I like that situation where the ANC is just being torn apart in that way. I don't have a lot of sympathy for them in that regard, but we'll see what they go with. But as I said earlier, just a little bit of a fair warning. I just want to warn people to be very careful not to get too involved in a lot of people are speculating, but if someone's telling you a story that you like, you're like, no, that's how I think it's going to happen, and then it doesn't turn out that way, don't feel completely disheveled.
No, I got you 100%. That's why I talk about all the coalition potentialities. And we don't know what will happen. And even if a coalition forms, that government could collapse.
Yeah. So
very short-lived.
I think it's a bit reckless for some people, some commentators, to say, well, if this coalition doesn't form, then everything South Africa explodes.
We're actually seeing that. And a lot of people on social media are saying, they said, South Africa is screwed. This is going to happen. We don't know. We have to wait and see. And there are potentially better outcomes. But in my view, for South Africa, there were no good results here. There are only less worse outcomes. One of which I've suggested, and I said this as soon as I saw the percentage for the elections on Thursday last week as they were coming in, it seemed to solidify, is I said that the smart money, the prudent decision would be for the ANC to approach the Democratic Alliance and the Inkatha Freedom Party. Bring the Inkatha Freedom Party through, and then the Democratic Alliance and the ANC do not nominate a candidate for president in Parliament. Let the IFP nominate Velenkosini Hlabisa, who was mentored by Mangosuthu Buthelezi for decades. He's a calm, reasonable, intelligent person, and he's also Zulu, and that's something there. So that has an impact, the biggest ethnic group in the country, and the main factor behind the MK's rise. So I think that's the smart money, but that's just one man's opinion. That doesn't mean that's going to happen. But I think that would calm the markets, and that would also probably potentially bring foreign direct investment back. But there's a lot of other issues: infrastructure, security, crime, electricity, water shedding. But anyway, so that's my take on it.
Yeah, just to sum up, if your dream coalition doesn't form, that's not guaranteed now the end of the world, apocalypse, everything collapses. That's not what you're saying, but a lot of people
No.
That's what I'm trying to calm a bit.
No, and I've done the same thing in my broadcast, telling people, let's wait and see, right? Because people are like, we're so screwed, but not necessarily. And also, look, I mean, while I am very critical of the African National Congress, particularly since 2018 when Ramaphosa took over, I was very generous with them and hoped that they had good intention prior to that. But I think there are a number of good people left in the ANC that actually care about good governance. The question is, will they rise to the occasion to push these radicals out and do the right thing for South Africa to keep the country stable and go forward? But I'll tell you, last night watching Ramaphosa, he was 2.5 hours late because our meeting ran over. And then when he spoke, I might as well have put a DVD in and watched the movie. It was he just going on and on and on. Finally got to the point where we're going to try to form a government of national unity. One important thing came from that, Ernst, last night. The government of national unity attempt, he mentioned the EFF, the Democratic Alliance, the Patriotic Alliance, and the IFP. He did not mention Umkhonto we Sizwe and Jacob Zuma. So that would seem to indicate that the leaders of the ANC, regardless of their positions, there's enough of them to say, we don't want the MK in there. And that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, from AfriForum and Solidarity's side, there's also a silver lining, and that's the fact that whatever coalition forms, that coalition is going to be desperate for results in the regards to they're going to have to show within a few months that service delivery is improving to legitimize that coalition. The good thing about AfriForum and Solidarity and everyone associated with the movement is we've, over decades now, have built up the resources, the know-how, the skills, and the people to be able to do service delivery on our own without the government, and to a large extent. What that means is that we can actually help the government to fix a lot of the problems, water, electricity, security, but with very strict conditions. It's not going to be unconditional. It's like, for just an example, take destructive evil bills like Bella Bill off the table. NHI, expropriation. There's so many different things, but that's the message that we sent this week as well. We had a press conference yesterday in this room where the Solidarity Movement said, which includes AfriForum, that we're willing and able to help fix many of the problems
but we have
in South
conditions.
Africa. But there are conditions that come with
Well,
it.
you're not alone. The EFF has made their conditions quite clear. If they'll join a coalition with the ANC, Ramaphosa has to go, and the Floyd Shababa must be the finance minister. And I'm going to say that that's a dead letter. That's not going to happen. All right, well, Ernst, it's always a pleasure. I want to thank you for your time and also for the invite to come back up here to AfriForum. I wasn't sure we'd be able to schedule it on short notice, but we did. And congratulations on your recent marriage, and congratulations on your position. And I should note that Tuesday on The Conscious Caracal, I will be appearing again. Can you tell people what that's about?
Yeah, so next week, Tuesday at 7 o'clock, South Africa time, we're going to be doing another episode of Stream of Consciousness on my YouTube channel with Chris Wyatt, and we're going to be doing an overview of Africa, what 2024 looks like, elections, conflict, instability, stability, and you'll be giving us everything you need to know. So I'm looking forward to that, and I hope a lot of your audience also joins us for that.
Well, I hope so too. So Ernst van Zyl, The Conscious Caracal, bye-bye donkey. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris.
Thanks a lot. All right, folks, we'll catch you a little bit later on. Look for more content. We'll be covering the elections. But hey, tomorrow, it's the URC quarterfinals at Loftus Versfeld. I'll be there, and I got a really good seat. I paid a little extra money for it. So looking forward to it. To anybody that's going to Loftus tomorrow, we're having a meet and greet at 11 a.m. at Salsa, the Mexican restaurant right there at Loftus Park. You can come join us, even if you're not going to the game. That's plenty early, so it shouldn't be an issue getting there. But you're welcome to come join us for the meet and greet tomorrow. And then if you're at the stadium, I'm happy to see you. Love to hang out with people at the stadium. Look, I'm a Stormers fan, but tomorrow, go Bulls. I'll be back in my hotel room or in the bar drinking not Castle Lager, but real beer, Windhoek Lager, in the evening when the Stormers play their game, and go Stormers. Thank you very much, Kialabo. Bye-bye, donkey. Thanks, everybody. Cheers. It's in the upper corner on the side. There you go. You got it?
Cool.